Ford, the company that changed the world. In 1908, a car cost more than most Americans earned in 2 years. It was a luxury item, built by hand, one at a time, for the rich. Then one man decided to break that rule completely. He didn't just build a car, he built a machine that could build cars faster than anyone thought possible. And in doing so, he changed how the entire world worked, traveled, and even thought about time itself. This is the story of how a farm boy from Michigan turned an impossible idea into the most influential company in automotive history, and how that same company nearly destroyed itself twice before clawing its way back from the edge. Chapter 1. The Farm Boy Who Hated Farming. Henry Ford was born in 1863 on a farm in Dearborn, Michigan, but Henry hated farm work. What he loved was machines, watches, engines, anything with moving parts. At 16, he left home and walked to Detroit to become a machinist's apprentice. By the 1890s, Ford was working as an engineer for the Edison Illuminating Company. But at night, in a workshop behind his house, he was building something else entirely. A self-propelled vehicle he called the quadricycle. In 1896, he finished it. 4 bicycle wheels, a small gasoline engine, and a top speed of 20 miles per hour. It wasn't the first car. Dozens of inventors across America and Europe were racing to build horseless carriages, but Ford had a different vision than most of them. While his competitors were building expensive machines for wealthy hobbyists, Ford kept saying the same thing to anyone who would listen. "I will build a car for the great multitude." Nobody believed him. His first 2 companies failed. The Detroit Automobile Company collapsed in 1901. The Henry Ford Company kicked him out in 1902 after investors lost patience with his obsession over cheap, reliable cars instead of quick profits. In 1903, with just $28,000 raised from a group of investors, including a coal dealer named Alexander Malcolmson, Ford tried again. The Ford Motor Company was born with 12 employees in a converted wagon factory on Mack Avenue in Detroit. Chapter 2. The $825 Gamble. For the first 5 years, Ford Motor Company built several models, the A, B, C, F, K, N, R, and S, testing what worked. But Ford kept obsessing over one idea: build something so simple, so durable, and so cheap that ordinary farmers and workers could afford it. In October 1908, that obsession became the Model T, priced at $825, about $25,000 in today's money. It was still expensive, but far less than the $2,000, $3,000 luxury cars of the era. It had a 20-horsepower engine, could hit 40 to 45 miles per hour, and was famously durable enough to handle America's terrible dirt roads. The Model T was an instant hit. Ford sold over 10,000 in its first full year. But Ford wasn't satisfied. He wanted the price to keep dropping, which meant he needed to make the cars faster and cheaper to build. In 1913, Ford introduced the moving assembly line at his Highland Park plant, inspired partly by meatpacking disassembly lines and grain elevator conveyor systems. Instead of workers moving to a stationary car, the car moved past stationary workers, each repeating one small task. The results were staggering. Before the assembly line, it took about 12 hours to build a single Model T. After the assembly line, it took roughly 93 minutes. By 1916, the price had dropped to $360, and Ford was selling over 500,000 cars a year. Chapter 3. The $5 Day That Shocked America. There was a problem with the assembly line. It was mind-numbingly repetitive, and workers hated it. Turnover at Ford's factories hit a staggering 370% annually, meaning Ford essentially had to replace its entire workforce almost 4 times a year just to keep the line running. In January 1914, Ford made a decision that stunned the business world. He doubled the minimum wage for his workers to $5 a day, nearly triple the average factory wage at the time. He also cut the workday from 9 hours to 8. Critics called it economic suicide. The Wall Street Journal accused Ford of applying biblical or spiritual principles to a business, calling it an economic crime. But Ford had calculated something his critics hadn't. Workers who could afford Ford cars would create more demand, turnover would plummet, and productivity would soar. He was right. Turnover collapsed, productivity jumped, and a new phrase entered the American vocabulary: Fordism, the idea that paying workers well enough to become consumers themselves could fuel an entire economy. By 1918, half of all cars in America were Model Ts. Chapter 4. The Dark Side of Success. But absolute success bred absolute stubbornness. Ford refused to change the Model T's basic design for nearly 2 decades. even as competitors like General Motors introduced yearly styling updates, colors beyond black, and installment credit plans that made their cars more accessible. Ford famously said, "Customers could have the Model T in any color so long as it is black," a decision driven by fast-drying black paint, not customer preference. While GM's Chevrolet division, under Alfred Sloan, offered variety and status symbols, Ford offered the same utilitarian car year after year. By the mid-1920s, Model T sales were cratering. In 1926 alone, sales dropped by hundreds of thousands. Ford was forced to admit defeat and shut down production of the Model T in 1927, a car that had sold over 15 million units, to retool factories for the Model A. This period also revealed a darker chapter. Henry Ford became increasingly erratic and authoritarian. He funded and published anti-Semitic propaganda through his newspaper, the Dearborn Independent, distributing The International Jew, a collection of conspiracy theories that were later cited approvingly by Adolf Hitler. This period severely damaged Ford's reputation and remains one of the most controversial aspects of his legacy. Ford also resisted unionization violently. In the 1932 Ford Hunger March, security forces and police killed 4 unemployed workers protesting outside the River Rouge plant. It took until 1941 for Ford Motor Company to finally recognize the United Auto Workers Union, the last of the major automakers to do so. Chapter 5. Near Collapse and the Whiz Kids. By the time Henry Ford died in 1947, the company he built was in serious trouble. Poor management, outdated systems, and wartime disruption had left Ford Motor Company hemorrhaging money, an estimated $10 million a month by some accounts, with virtually no modern accounting or planning systems in place. Henry Ford II, the founder's grandson, took control in 1945 at just 28 years old. He made a bold move, hiring a group of 10 former U.S. Army Air Force statisticians and analysts, who became known as the Whiz Kids, including future Defense Secretary Robert McNamara. They modernized Ford's finance, planning, and operations from the ground up, dragging the company back from the brink. This turnaround set the stage for Ford's next act, reinventing itself not through utility, but through desire. Chapter 6. From Crisis to Cultural Icon. In 1956, Ford went public, ending decades of complete family ownership. Then in 1964, under the leadership of Lee Iacocca, Ford launched the Mustang, a car that would define an entirely new category, the pony car. It became an instant cultural phenomenon, selling over 1 million units in under 2 years. But Ford's story wasn't without more turbulence. The 1970s Pinto scandal, where design flaws led to fuel tank fires in rear-end collisions, became one of the most infamous corporate safety failures in American history, resulting in lawsuits, a criminal trial, and a permanently damaged reputation for cutting corners on safety. Decades later, Ford faced its most serious test yet, the 2008 financial crisis. While GM and Chrysler both took government bailouts and filed for bankruptcy, Ford's CEO Alan Mulally had mortgaged nearly all of the company's assets in 2006 to raise $23.6 billion in cash, a decision seen as reckless at the time. It turned out to be the smartest gamble in the company's history. Ford survived 2008 without a bailout, emerging as the only major American automaker to avoid bankruptcy. Today, Ford Motor Company is worth tens of billions of dollars, navigating a new transformation toward electric vehicles with the F-150 Lightning and Mustang Mach-E. It's a company that has survived world wars, near bankruptcy, cultural boycotts, safety scandals, and one of the most disruptive shifts the auto industry has ever seen. From a farm boy's obsession with cheap, reliable transportation to a company that now competes with Tesla for the future of driving, Ford's story is proof that the biggest empires are rarely built by luck. They're built on obsession, reinvented through crisis, and nearly destroyed by the same stubbornness that made them great in the first place. If you want to see how Ford's biggest rival clawed its way to becoming the largest company in the world and then collapsed into government hands, the story of General Motors is even wilder. Let's get into it.